Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan. Hello, Rohan. How's it going?
Hey, good.
And today we are joined by Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Hello.
This episode of the Home Assistant Podcast is brought to you by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP Home projects. Configuration is done via the use of an interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML. I think I did that without almost a bit of stuff up there, but that's okay.
It's pretty good.
Thank you. Ryan, welcome to the show. It's been a couple of attempts to get you on. We've had power blackouts, internet outages, schedules conflicting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've had it all, right? So thank you for bearing with us. Welcome to the show, finally. So maybe give us a quick intro on who you are, whereabouts in the world you're from, and how you got here.
Sure. So I'm Ryan. I been into Home Assistant for quite a while. Been doing home automation for 12 years probably now. Started with X10 and moved through almost every technology between there and now. And a couple of years ago, about really seriously yet last year, but started a YouTube channel and been growing steadily ever since. So my focus primarily is teaching people smart home tech. I do reviews, I do stuff like that, but a lot of it is like in-depth how-to guides on, I have one on setting up Home Assistant for people because people would constantly ask me, how do I set that up? And so just, okay, make a video, show people how to do it. I have a background, I'm in IT, engineering and IT. So I've been good about how to explain things to people. So that's kind of what started the whole, hey, you should do a YouTube. So.
Nice.
And I'm from middle of the United States, dead center. So Kansas City, Missouri area. So
amazing.
Right smack dab in the middle of the United States.
So funny. Being like a YouTuber that's done, all these how-to videos, how do you find having to keep them up to date, I guess, but maybe particularly, especially in the early days. I know when, a few YouTube, very early days, before the yearly release, 0 point whatever release, things would change so often, and a lot of people complain, oh, you can't look at that video anymore. Things have changed too much. Have you had to go back and revisit any videos?
I've updated it mostly because either the service is gone or something has changed. I mean, obviously in the world of the cloud, 1 second they pull the rug out from under you. So, for example, some of the how-to guides I do, on the Wise cameras, they've now removed the RTSP firmware. It's not available anymore. So that's those videos. And so there's some videos that have kind of been superseded by other videos. But for the most part, they're installing Home Assistant is going to be the same today as it is, a year ago, until they come out with some way of, I guess instead of using Etcher, now you can use the built-in Home Assistant flasher, which is easier, or a Raspberry Pi flasher. It's part of that now. But for the most part, it's pretty ubiquitous. But there definitely are updates, as things change. And I have a few videos that were about a specific version, and those obviously people don't care about now.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's cool. What, was it really just the people asking you all the time to be like, hey, why, or how do I do this? Is that really what got you into it? Was there any other things that you were like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to do a whole YouTube thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I started, so it actually kind of started with the company I worked at before this one that my day job, right? We were doing, we were actually featured in a TV show called Make 48. It was like a with PBS kind of thing, public broadcasting system here in America. And it was like they had a competition show where people came up with ideas, and in 48 hours they would turn it into an ideate, turn it into a prototype, like a rough prototype. Cool. And so they came to us. We were manufacturers, so they came to us to actually manufacture this piece of electronics. So we were featured in an episode. So I actually got to be in the episode and play around with it a little bit and talking to the guys. And I said, hey, I've got this idea, for a smart home show based off the This Old House TV show, right? So This Smart House, that's where the name of this channel comes from. And so he's like, oh, that's a great idea, and kind of shelved it for a while. And then I read Gary Vaynerchuk's book on one of his books on crushing it. I think it was Crush It or Crushing It, one of those two. And it was like, okay, I could actually turn this into something, right? Even though, because I figured it's too niche. Who's going to want to learn smart home stuff, right? It's too complicated. It's too whatever. And so, but then that was sort of the genesis of that. Okay, let's just throw something together. So I put my phone on a tripod and recorded my first video. And, and actually it was like, I recorded it and then didn't make another video for a year later. And then made another video, and then it was 6 months, and then it was 3 months. And then finally in April of last year, it was just like, okay, I'm going to do this part-time. I'm going to, try to squeeze it in between kids and job and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah. It's like our blog post, except opposite, where it's spaced out longer between blog posts for me in my case, but that's funny. No, that's cool though. So what really got you into the smart home? So we kind of got the idea of how you got into the making videos about smart home, but what got you into the smart home itself?
I'm always like a sci-fi fan. You've always wanted, obviously now everyone wants to be Tony Stark, but before that it was like the Jetsons, and you're like, I want, all this. Yeah. And I've always been a tech nerd, right? I've always liked to play with the latest gadgets and stuff like that. So
sure.
Much to my wife's chagrin, I've got piles of stuff back here. I've got to play with. I've got Amazon boxes showing up almost every day of stuff to play with, but I've always been that kind of stuff. So played with that. And then when I got into my first house, I was like, okay, well, let's play with it. Of course, back then the technology was just, awful in comparison to now. There was a couple of standards. There was a couple of things you could do, and it never really worked back then, but I kept playing with it and kept trying the new, I even had a version. There's an old called M Control, which was running on a Windows media server, like those old Windows media servers back in the day. I had one running on that. So it just played with it in different iterations. And finally, when Vera came out, that was the first actual platform that worked, that had you could do this, and then they tie these things together. And so it almost feels like a predecessor to Home Assistant, except for obviously it wasn't as open as Home Assistant is. And that was sort of like, okay, this can actually do something. This can actually work. That was the first time my wife was like, oh, this is really cool. It actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what's that hub that Google killed? It was like a Kickstarter. Was it, I'm going to say the Revolut hub. There was
my gosh.
I know, it's so
I
old
can
now.
picture the logo. It's like a green,
Yeah. I just remember that being as one of the very first hubs of, that was designed to be, bringing all different systems in, right? But I think Google bought it out and killed it off, and then it became
one of the problems that we have these days is, every time it used to be like, oh man, like Ring gets bought by Amazon, well, that's gonna be great, and then you're like, that's where things go to die, right? They package it and move it off, and
So this episode's probably going to be released. This is going to be old news by the time this episode comes out. But I heard today that Amazon just brought out Roomba.
iRobot. I saw that.
Yeah, iRobot. Sorry. Yeah. Crazy, right?
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? And I'm not an Amazon. I mean, I'm an Amazon person, but we're a Google home. I've got way too many Google Assistant devices in my house. Like, you literally yell the code word and you hear about 20 beeps in the house. It's bad, right? But after today's announcement, or yesterday's announcement about I alluded to it earlier, the whole IFTTT, them kind of crippling the Google Assistant. I'm like, I might be switching to Amazon now, because it really hacked me off that they decided to remove some features that I've been using like hardcore in my home, my smart home stuff. So, but that's really cool that they're buying that. It'd be really interesting to see how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, I don't know. I suspect that it's going to be very similar to a lot of other Amazon acquisitions, which is not a whole lot of stuff. I mean, like they iRobot hadn't really innovated a whole lot. I mean, like if you look at what they initially did, it was actually really cool, right?
Yeah, they were the first and best.
Totally. Right, like they were the first in the market with it, and now I mean they came up with the one that self removes, it cleans itself out, whatever, fine. But a lot of other guys have that too, right? And a lot of other companies have that. So it's like,
and they do it, and it's less expensive. And I get a lot. I mean, that's one of the things I do I get a lot of requests to review on is robots. And, I've got a couple of self-emptying ones I played with, and I don't have a Roomba, so I can't compare it, but it's like, it self-empties, right? It works. It's half the price of Roomba. So I think that's probably, to me, it seems like that'll be, maybe the price point will cut down, but iRobot seems like a fairly large company. So I don't know if they're going to if the manufacturing costs are going to drop since they're going to be under Amazon or whatever.
Well, I think it's a lot of it might be also for the IP behind it, right? Like they've got a bunch of patents. I know at one point it was anybody that had a robot vacuum product had to pay iRobot for their licensing. Yeah. Exactly. So, but maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but I just think I think it's interesting because, again, not a ton of stuff comes out of Amazon. Like, it doesn't go any faster or anything like that. You would assume a large company means, okay, more resources, or, you know, they want to do something with it, but I don't know.
I call it now. You're going to start seeing robots with Alexa on top of it. So you could say, you know, so it's going to roll. Right. You'll say the code word and it'll drive into the room and have the screen and look at you. Cause
that's right.
My mother-in-law has one of those 10-inch ones that move, which is kind of freaky.
I was just about to say, they already do that, right? Like they follow you around the room. Yeah.
It's just going to follow you in. Wasn't there a robot that somebody, a Kickstarter they did that had that where it would like follow you around?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, it was like a personal assistant that would follow you around.
Yeah.
I think that got killed off too from memory.
Well, I mean, Elon's making essentially the like iRobot as another company, as in like the movie kind of style, right? Like an actual human arms, legs, and it's like a assistant or something like that. So that'd be interesting. Skynet coming real.
One of my family's favorite movies to watch as a family is The Mitchells versus the Machines on Netflix. Have you watched that? Seen that movie?
I haven't. No.
It's an anime. It's great. It's the same people that did Into the Spider-Verse, the animated one. It's excellent. It's great. But anyway, that's the plot of that is this kind of misfit family goes up against the iRobot, you know, from like Isaac Asimov, like that. Like they go up against the robot revolution. It's really you would definitely appreciate it if you haven't seen it. On Netflix, it's great. It's good for even for adults. I love watching it. There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of like, basically, it's being taken over by the smart assistant. They develop a smart assistant, and he throws it away, and then she takes over, and that's the plot of the movie. It's a good one. So anyway, that's a fun one to watch.
I really want one of those Tesla robots. I don't know. I want one, right? I don't know what I would do with it. I don't have any manual work that I need to be done. But I have one, right?
I want one. I want to have one. I want a self-driving car. I want all that.
Yeah. Want it all. Yeah. I welcome the artificial overlords, like the artificial intelligence overlords. Bring them on, right?
Just as long as they're nice. Yeah. As long as they're at least nice to us. That's why you should be nice, right? That's why you got to teach your kids to say thank you to your assistant. So when they take over, you don't get put on the list.
That's it. You don't make the naughty list. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. So you started with X10. I guess you then got the Vera. What are you using?
Yeah. So I had X10 and then I had a Z stick for a little while on that M control software, but it didn't do very well. I did Insteon for quite a while. So I've been off Insteon. I actually have a box full of gear in the basement that I pulled from my last house when we moved here that I never reinstalled. And I was sad to see about that, but that was really cool that they actually they're buying out the IP and that's kind of I almost feel like there should be in it, and people are going to say, putting laws on people, but you should almost have to have a law that says if you sell a product and you go out of business or whatever it is, you have to open source your software so that way these devices don't turn into e-waste. I mean, it's
interesting because I don't know what the laws like in other countries, but for here, like car manufacturers, right? Like you have to if you're going to close your business down, if you've sold a car in the market, you have to have like X amount of years of spare parts and support for that vehicle, right? You can't just go out of business. So surely there has to be something that could be done for technology, right?
Exactly. I mean, of course, it's gonna be so difficult because you've got a lot of tech coming out of different countries, out of the China market. So but at least for major companies like Google, right? They wouldn't be able to just abandon a piece of hardware and say, guess what? It's a brick now. Great. I've got 12 of them in my house. What the hell am I going to do with them now? Throw them in the trash can? So
Yeah, exactly.
And it would be great to have that, the software open sourced or maybe even the hardware design open source. So you could I broke a piece. I can 3D print it now, and so, yeah, that's why I like the Zigbee. I mean, Zigbee and Z-Wave protocols, because of, I'm a very big fan of, I love Z-Wave and I like Zigbee too. Cause it's just like Philips Hue, they trash your hub. What are you going to do? I'll just put them on Zigbee to MQTT and now you're done. You've got it, it's never going to go away because it's open source at this stage.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Insteon was actually funny because it started out as pure local. Like it was so old that it went through a few iterations of PLMs and PLCs. And then all of a sudden they're like cloud. And then it was like, it's good gear too. Like I love I had an Insteon keypad that it was in my old basement where you could walk downstairs and hit one button, and then these lights would turn to the movie mode would turn on. It was really nice, but now went cloud, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, now you depend on it.
Yeah, that's right. So what are you running in Home Assistant now? Like, what are technology? Obviously, no X10, but you've got Zigbee, Z-Wave. What else is in your smart home tech stack, I could say?
Oh, let me bring up the integrations tab.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, when I record videos, I have a second Home Assistant instance. I have a dev instance on running as a virtual machine. And I try to use it, but then I forget to update it. So when I go sit down to record, I'm like, oh, it's not updated and it doesn't have this and this. So I ended up having to blur out half of my integrations tab because it's got my email address and stuff all over it, things like that. So I had, for the primary technologies, it's Zigbee and Z-Wave are the main ones. I have a couple of different Z-Wave or Zigbee networks because of I've got a dedicated Aqara one that I've been playing with because I just did a review on some Aqara gear. All of my Hue stuff's been integrated in now, so it's all in the Zigbee 2 MQTT. I do have a few Wi-Fi plugs here and there. A few of them have been Tasmodified or converted over to ESP Home. So I've got a lot of ESP Home stuff. There's a lot of network stuff on here as well. I do have some HomeKit gear just because I've got it to play with. And it's one thing I say about HomeKit is there's a lot of things that only integrate through HomeKit. And since Home Assistant can speak HomeKit, it integrates it right in. So like this Aqara hub I just did a review on, it goes right in. It requires nothing. There's no Aqara didn't have to do anything because it's HomeKit, right? It has that, which Matter will do that as well, right? Because it supports that standard. It goes through there. So
as a non-Apple user, like I'm Android, I am starting to look for that HomeKit logo just because I know it will support local control, right? And I don't have to worry about, local to you or anything like that. I just know it's going to work.
100% Android here. I have an iPad and I've got a MacBook for work, but always been, I've been Android since, Cupcake, right? Way back when. And then I see that now. And before I kind of dismissed it. And now I'm like, no, that's really good. I like to see that that's actually in there because I can play with it. And then I've got Homebridge set up. So I've got a bunch of stuff integrated through that, which is pretty nice as well. I've really been getting into MQTT. Like I really like MQTT for a variety of things. I use it to store variables. I just did a video where I've got my car, just any car, right? I can upload, fuel data. I can upload miles per gallon, where it's located, all that stuff using an ODB2 reader through MQTT, which is kind of nice.
That's nice. What are you using to do that? Just out of curiosity, is there a particular port you got, or are you using like Tracker or something?
Using Torque.
Okay.
TRQUE on it is an old app. Like it is it's been around for 10 years almost.
Nice.
It looks like it too, but it works really well. And there is a native integration with Home Assistant, but it didn't work for me. And so I did a workaround on this video, but a few users have reported it does have a direct integration where it will actually upload. You can set the URL and it'll upload into your Home Assistant environment. So the Torque, I actually have it. It's really complicated in mine, but it like writes to a CSV file on my phone, and then Tasker puts that into the cloud for me. So Torque, it's basically just designed to pull data out of an ODB2 reader. Any cheap, $15 Amazon ODB2 reader, it'll pull the data out, but it does have a native integration that will upload to Home Assistant. But that didn't work depending on your SSL certificates and things like that. If you have Nabu Casa, it won't work. So I developed another method that actually writes a CSV file, and then Tasker, which if you haven't used Tasker, it's extremely powerful on Android.
Yeah.
I could probably have an entire channel just dedicated to Tasker because it's so powerful. I think I have 70 active profiles on my phone, but it'll read that data and then it'll put it into Home Assistant. So, I've got I can when I set my phone on the charger at night, it tells Home Assistant to shut the shades, turn off the lights downstairs, all that good stuff.
So do you have a SIM card in that port in your phone that can then upload data to the cloud, I'm guessing, or however it gets into
It uses my phone. It uses Android. It uses my actual – so my phone has to be in the car. I did look into some other solutions for that. Like I was trying to maybe build a Raspberry Pi using like a Pi W, and then have it log the data on board. And then when you get home, it would upload the data to there. Or if you wanted to use your Wi-Fi or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I think, what was that Automate product that they just banned? Another one that just went straight into the bin, right?
Yep, exactly.
Similar to that. Yeah, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. I'm trying to get some car data into Home Assistant just for the data, right? Just see how it
just because,
comes out.
Just because that's half of home automation is because I can.
Yeah.
I've got a nice fuel gauge on my dashboard in a Home Assistant. I can bring it up and it has a fuel gauge that tells me how much gas is left in my car.
That's cool.
If anything for that, just to say when the fuel gets to this level, remind me to go get petrol in the car and make sure it's on a cheap day. You look at APIs of prices around town, find it when it's cheapest, and
tell me where to go.
That's my eventual goal.
Yeah. Well, you might also. I was going to say, you might also want to say like, hey, set my alarm like 5 minutes earlier so you have the time to get up, go and go get gas, right?
I did that for a while. I was using an app called Dash, and it had a IFTTT integration, and it would say if the fuel level is below a certain amount, then it would send me a notification at 6 a.m. the next day, and it was like, okay, I need to get up early and go to work and fill up my car.
Yeah, that's cool.
But that's neat. So what else are you doing? And like, what are some of your favorite automations? Like,
so I just did a video kind of where I talked about some of my favorite very simple automations. My favorite one is walking into the bathroom and having the lights turned on. Like it's so simple, but that sort of stuff just makes you feel like the actual automations. Like that's the part that I think most people would like to get to, where I don't have to touch Home Assistant. I just want to, set it up to where I walk downstairs in the morning. If it's after a certain time, if it's before 5 a.m., like I have to let the dog out or something, only certain lights come on. If it's the sun's coming up, it actually turns all the lights on and opens all my shades. And it's like, I feel like Tony Stark. It's amazing. Yeah. That kind of stuff is just or when it reminds you to do something that you forgot to do. Like this last video, I said, opening a window, right? My son loves to open windows. He's like, I want some fresh air. I'm like, yeah, but it's 90 degrees and 100% humidity outside. It's that you just made it worse. So that it turns off the air conditioners. Just stuff like that, where it's things that fit in and work reliably. That's the stuff I like the most.
Yeah, there's so much you can do when the whole house is in one brain, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you get silos of lights can only do light things and all that, it just really hamstrings what the possibilities are.
For sure. I mean, that's why I love about Home Assistant is that everything can go into one if it's possible. And I just wish I've got a couple of brands of products I really love, but they don't have open APIs. Nobody's been able to hack them. I mean, that's what ends up usually happening. You get a critical mass of enough users to get angry about it that they work together on a project to either reverse engineer an application, and that happened with the Wise cameras. There was a whole thing with them that they reverse engineered it, and then all of a sudden they realized, oops, we're 50% of the API calls. Like 10,000 users were 50% of the API calls against the backend, and it caused problems. And thankfully, Wise worked with the community and they came to an understanding. But still, it's like, if you just had an API, we wouldn't have this problem.
Well, there's one way to create an API, right? It's hammer the crap out of them and then be like, oh, crap. Okay, maybe we should do this properly.
I mean, everything has an API that's cloud-based, right? It has to. That's what it does, but just not documented. So they figure out the documentation. They intercept tokens in the traffic and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, well, then you can rate limit. You can start doing things intelligently, right? So
yeah, exactly. And so I'm a huge proponent. I mean, I absolutely love to play around with APIs. I have overly, I was joking with my wife, these overly complicated systems that use I've got code running in the cloud that will do something stupid. Like I use Notion for my, second brain, everything. And, that's what I was so angry about with this IFTTT change is that I can tell Google, hey, add this, I say capture something, and it puts it into Notion for me. I say, new task, and it adds it to Notion as a task list in a specific format that I like. Yeah. And it's like, now it's getting dumber. I'm like, I hate that. Why did they take that? Why are they taking that away?
That's brutal.
In crypto, there's a saying, not your keys, not your crypto, right? Like not your wallet, not your keys, not your crypto. It's similar to here, like if you don't own the infrastructure and you don't, have that all running locally, it's not technically your
It's not yours.
system,
No.
right?
It can be taken away from you or changed or legislated away in some cases, and just all of a sudden you don't have it. Yeah, that's definitely a proponent of running anything local. Obviously, I have a ton of cloud stuff, but if I can run it local, I'll run it local. It's
totally. I mean, but you mentioned you have you work at an electronics manufacturer, right? And you've got a electrical engineering background. Do you put any of that to use in your personal life? Like in the sense that, do you build a lot of your own devices using like an ESP32 or any of those kind of? Yeah,
I do play around with a lot of that stuff. I'm also a bad coder, but I can code stuff, and so I could put together something that's going to work. It's not going to be efficient.
If it works.
But yeah, like behind me here, obviously if you're listening on audio, but I've got Hyperion set up on this TV behind me. And so, that uses a combination of different things. So I did a video on that. I've got these lights under my monitors are controlled with an ESP32 that's running WLED. Nice. I've got quite a few ESP home devices that I've played with. Actually, I'm working with a PCB manufacturer. It's a very simple PCB I designed for this one, but it was actually I put it together. It's really, it's like 4 resistors and some terminals, but I was able to put that together for that and actually work first time. I was like, woohoo! That's so cool. I got that. So that's I definitely like to play around with those, that sort of stuff, and especially with the coding too. Like I like to get in, like I said, mostly with what you consider like command line stuff. API calls, JSON. Parsing JSON here or there. I did a whole video with SwitchBot, this integration for SwitchBot using their cloud API, which is pretty powerful. So you can control all the SwitchBot devices, which most of those now are controlled with Bluetooth locally, which you can do that as an option. But if you have a bigger house, you can't reach some of the devices. So if you have their hub, you can actually communicate with the hub via their API. And they have it fully documented. It's not one of those things you have to hack. They actually have the documentation out there.
Interesting.
That's neat. Yeah.
Cool. What would you say is your party trick automation? Like if you were bringing over friends to the house and you wanted to show off your smart home, what's your go-to? Hey, my house does this. Does your house do that? I bet it doesn't, right? What would you, what would you do?
I don't have a party button. I've thought about putting a party button in, like Parks and Recreation. They had the scene where they hit a button and I'll just hey, I'll turn these lights on, turn those lights on, open the shades. I just bought a bunch of those IKEA shades.
Yeah.
And I've got an upcoming video on those. It just makes you feel the coolest thing ever when they work. When they work.
I was going to ask because I was looking at those. My wife wants to put a couple of roller shades in, so I was like, okay, I might as well do the IKEA ones because those are Zigbee based, right? They're part of the strategy.
No, yes, I'm sorry, they are Zigbee based. Yes, they're Zigbee based. Their battery power is Zigbee based. Yeah. They're very well designed. They use this little it's a proprietary battery, but it's just charged over micro USB, and you buy a couple of them. You can just swap them out.
Yeah,
they're great. The problem is I don't know if it's just because I'm using Zigbee to MQTT to control them, but sometimes they seem to go to sleep and not wake up. So either you have to say, so I've got them grouped together in a cover group, and I'll say, I'll tell the assistant to open them, and 3 will open and 1 will just sit there, or 1 will go and stop. And you're like, what the hell? So I'm currently working on some code to make a virtual cover device. And then basically that'll be the set point. So you say open to 50%. And then what it will do is it'll tell them to open, and then it'll pull them. And if they're not open at the right position, then it'll tell them to do it again and just reep about 3 times until they. So
right.
Like this morning, I walked downstairs.
Actually, like I really like that.
If I can figure it out, I've basically created a virtual MQTT device, and then I don't want to beat it to death because if I beat it to death, it'll run the batteries down.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that my wife has learned to give the command 2 or 3 times to finally get that one to wake up. It's every so often, like this morning, one of my shades wasn't responding. I had to go pull the battery out, put it back in again. And then as soon as I put the battery back in again, it literally opened, stopped, closed, opened. Like it had gotten all the commands queued for it. It was weird. Yeah. So I have a feeling it's the way it sleeps. It may be one of those things where the community might figure out, oh, it's got a different sleep schedule than like the Xiaomi devices when they first came out. They have a different sleep number, like the Akara devices. Those have a different sleep schedule than most devices do, so they would fall off the network really easily. I think they fixed it now, but when they first came out, it was like they were not reliable on a third-party hub. You had to use the main hub.
I wonder if, because I think IKEA does put out firmware updates for a lot of their stuff. I think it's a little hard to find because I forget how or why I was looking it up. But
actually, it's integrated into Zigbee to MQTT now. They actually can do
they'll. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it does.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, actually, and that's one of the markers in the device is it'll tell you if there's an update available, and that's probably what it is. You're actually absolutely right. It does say in there for quite a few of these devices, update available.
Yeah, because that might be a potentially the fix for it, right? Because if you're running into it, chances are other folks have too, right? Just with
that's a good point. Yeah, you probably update the firmware. You have to, it's just, and that's one of those like modern phrases. I have to update the firmware on my shades. Like,
right?
What?
I mean,
oh crap! I can't use my coffee pot because it's got to connect to my Wi-Fi network.
I have to download a software update to have my coffee this morning, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's so many stupid ones too, right? There's also like fridges and like.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, washers and dryers and stuff. It's like, I've got mine automated, but it's only I pull information from the washer and dryer. I don't like give it commands. I just have sensors on them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to I don't want to see how my dryer is doing. Oh, you've got 15 minutes left in your dry cycle. I don't care.
Yeah.
Tell me when it's done.
So yeah, exactly. Tell me when it's done, then I'll take some action. Don't bother me.
Remind me to. I mainly did that. I put it in for my washing machine to remind me to move it over to the dryer because there'd be times where you come back 2 days later and you're like, oh my God, I forgot to move it over. It stinks. I got to wash it all over again.
Then you're back to square one.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been really getting into Docker and Portainer and stuff a lot as well. I think that's a big future. I think a lot of people don't want to touch that because it seems very complicated, but one of the ones is the new somebody built a Wise bridge that runs in Docker that does will actually convert the stream. I don't know how they did it, but they'll actually convert the stream to RTSP and allow you to pull Wise cameras, even local only. They actually have an option to do local only, and it's like it may or may not work depending on the firmware, but it will basically go. Yeah. If it can pull the local stream, it'll do local stream first, and then it will go cloud stream from there. So it's pretty. It's a good project. Like
that's interesting. I found a similar project for Reolink cameras. I just randomly, I don't know how I got onto it. Like the Google Trail. I think I went to Google to Home Assistant Community, and then off to some random GitHub repo. But yeah, there's a few like. Does exactly the same thing, right? Takes the Reolink camera stream that goes to the cloud, converts it into RTSP, and away you go. Put it wherever you need.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the nice things about having an open source community is that people that are actual programmers, actual coders can figure that stuff out. People who design these things. I actually worked on a project at my last job where we were designing a camera, and it's so funny how much you're like, oh yeah, like. We're buying parts that are actually in the Wise cameras. Like it's not like when these people, nobody greenfields a project. Nobody goes out there and builds a camera and 100% of the components are bespoke. They're using technology from here. They're using sensors from there. And so a lot of times people will reverse engineer it and go, oh, I can just flash this firmware on that camera and we're off and running. Yeah. So
it's a bit like Inception, right? Like you get to see the layers of hardware. Like you see it all the time in software, but then in hardware you go, that little chip there is the same thing used over here, and I can just buy it on AliExpress for this amount. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, there's only so many manufacturers of
yeah, exactly. And it's too expensive for you to go out and build your own. Nobody wants to design their own encoder board for video. Like, why would you want to do that? That's just you sink your project right then and there. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
But that's pretty neat. Anything else you're up to?
Just
what are some of your future aspirations? Let's try that one.
Well, so I'm currently my current. Hopefully one of these days I can make this a full-time gig. I'm working for a startup now, and that's a lot of work. But at one day that they may go public and I can cash out and move on and maybe just do this permanently. I really like doing, I like helping people. One of the things I've joked with the guys at Wise, I'm like, you guys should pay me for tech support because I'm answering people's questions. Like my most popular video is my review of the Wise V3 camera, and people ask questions and I'm trying to always answer everybody's questions. And so it's like, I've gotten a lot of like, how does this work? Or can this work like this? And so like, you guys should pay me for tech support. But they send me enough gear. It's probably fine.
That's
yeah, they'll pay you on place.
Just keep doing that.
Yeah, just to me. So yeah, I mean, I think that my main goal is really to help people learn this stuff. I really encourage like my neighbors and stuff. They always come over and ask me. Actually, my neighbor right across the street just had an issue where his washing machine leaked. Like the hose broke on the back of his washing machine, and it ended up like he was in his garage pulling the ceiling out of his garage because it was all covered in water. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you need to get a shutoff valve. And he and I were talking out in the driveway the other day. One of my first videos was about the one of the retrofit shutoff valves for the water. So, I've got it tied to a handful of leak sensors. Thankfully, never had to use it, but it's there. And like stuff like that would just make, okay. It gives you that little bit of extra, sense of comfort that that if it leaks, it's going to shut off, or if you find a leak, you can shut it off. Same thing with gas, right? You want to have a gas sensor. Oh, I left the stove on, or I left the range on. I want to, get alerted about it. So things like that, I think, are going to be super. I think having that sort of stuff in every home is going to be big for people. So
yeah.
Have you had any false positives with the water flood detectors? Like, I want to put a shutoff valve in, but I would be conscious that I would. And it's the same thing why I don't have a siren, right? Like, as soon as I get a false positive and the water gets shut off, I'm going to cause more inconvenience than what it's worth.
I actually haven't had any false positives. I'm using the Aqara water sensors, and they're pretty. My biggest concern is that, are they working, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so every so often I try to go back and, take one and put it, on the sink top and see if it gets set off, and then making sure the automation, right? The same thing with like my smoke detectors, right? I've got the smoke detectors wired into a relay so that I can pull, if they go off, I get notifications, but I don't test it often enough to know if it's actually working or not. And so I need to, put that on my task list every 3 months, is to test, make sure the smoke detectors are still, the smoke detector is working, but the funny thing about my shutoff valve was, for a while there, it was showing up in my Google Assistant. And so it was in the basement room, because that's where it is, in the basement. And so you'd say, shut down the basement to turn off the TV and stuff down when the kids are done. And it would turn the water off to the house.
Turns off your main.
And I'm like, oops.
Oh, yeah.
But then I could tell Google to turn back on the water. So that's the nice thing too. It's like, turn back on the water. Okay. Yeah.
Sure.
So that's just a retrofit on like a existing valve.
Yeah. I picked it was by Dome, which is a Z-Wave.
Yeah.
And it requires AC mains to power it, because it's a giant, it's very powerful. Like, it'll break your finger off if you're not careful. So, and it just actuates the quarter turn valve.
Nice.
And so it's really, I mentioned it in the video, but mine's really weird because it's PEX, right? So it's the plastic stuff, but they ran a piece of rebar, like, to stabilize the PEX where it goes into the ground. And it's got a piece of rebar that sticks up, and it almost sticks up by the valve. So like, I had to there's only one specific position I could get it in to where it would be behind the rebar, but it would still be able to actuate the valve. But it works. Like I said, it works pretty well, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like, that should almost be like standardized, right? You should almost, everybody, you have a shutoff valve for your gas. Not necessarily electricity, but it's nice to be able to have that sort of stuff. You're starting to see smart breakers come out now.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, smart breakers, right? Like,
makes
sense.
Well, it's interesting because there's some. So, like, for me, for example, I don't have a quarter turn valve. I have an actual tap style, for my water main, and there's nothing that has
you could. I mean, you probably just you could call a plumber and have them replace it with a quarter turn, probably.
Yeah, realistically, I mean, problem is I got to shut off the water from the city and do all that. So it's, by the time all of that happens, I'm spending like $800.
Yeah, you actually could turn off your own water. I had a time where I helped a friend move into their house, and they forgot to call the water department, and they had no water in their house, and so I was able to turn on the water for them and say, okay, call them Monday morning and tell them you turn it on at 10:15 in the morning on Saturday. Right? I don't want somebody knocking on my door saying, hey, what are you doing? Stealing water from us. So, but that's the problem too, is things like that. There's no way, right? There'd be no way to automate that without making something custom to spin that valve around. So, and and they actually have ones you can cut in too. You can actually replace the entire valve with a smart valve, but then that just like, I liked having, everything I have has, I replace the switches, right? So I have a manual way of turning on my lights. Like that would be the absolute worst thing, to walk in and have no lights and you can't turn them on. Like,
Well, same. That's why I would always want to retrofit. I would never want a native thing. What happens when, power goes out? What happens when, like, whatever, right? Stuff happens, right? Your Home Assistant instance is down, whatever. So great. Well, I can't break this thing open and open it, right? Yeah. Like, so that's
anything safety rated, you want to have redundancies. I used to work in industrial automation, and it was like the levels of redundancies in like safety stuff, like emergency stop buttons. It's stupid. Like, but it makes sense, right? Yeah. You wouldn't want to have it where when you hit that, it doesn't shut the, that's the button, right? You want to have that button to shut things off if it's bad enough.
Yeah, and typically a hard cut, like break the wire, like
exactly. That's one of the things. Like you see future stuff, like cyberpunk and things like that, where you have all the implanted gear. That would be the thing that would freak me out. Is like I'd want something I could turn off, where it's like if it's going haywire, I don't want anything you can't turn off, right? So implanted stuff would be cool, but you want to be able to turn it off when it goes haywire.
Yeah. Again, just wear a helmet instead of having it in your brain, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I want the smart contacts. I'm waiting for those. I want that. That would be pretty cool. I still think smart glasses I still think smart glasses have a place. Like I know Google Glass tanked because it was goofy looking, but like I'm ready for that. I want to see the smart glass technology. I think will be huge when that actually gets perfected.
I don't know. I saw a YouTube video of I think it was like an interpretation of what like the future will be like with this blend of virtual reality and everything, right? And this guy's got these glasses on, and he's walking around in the supermarket, and everything's purple and flashing at him, and the battery dies in his glasses, and you take it off, and everything goes away, and it's bland and boring. Then the glasses come back on, and advertising starts coming back at him, like, is that the world we really want? Like where advertising is just going to be in my eyes that I just can't, get rid of. So.
Yeah. It's, but apparently a lot of people are working on the whole smart contacts and more smart glasses. I heard Google might kick it off again. I don't know. Maybe I'm confusing that with some other article, but like I was reading on something saying that a lot of this stuff is potentially coming back.
So Ryan, what else you've done your future plans. Is there anything else that you have a need to do? Like how are you using, I guess, how's the family finding Home Assistant? Do they have suggestions for you?
I've actually made the joke that I need to start. So again, I'm an IT director with my day job. I need to start a service desk, help desk for home. So when people have questions about stuff, we've jokingly said, because I have grandparents come over and watch the kids and stuff like that. Like we almost have a manual for the house that explains to people how to use it. But fortunately, it's pretty easy nowadays. But my kids, of course, my oldest loves all the stuff. I put LED strips under his bed for a video, and he absolutely loves it. Right, he can hit a button and it syncs to music, and and so he loves that. And we've used a lot of like smart lights for to wake him up in the morning. Like he's got a light that turns green when he can wake up and come out of his room. Obviously now he's old enough he can read a clock, but before he could read a clock, it was like this light green, because he'd wake up in the middle of the night and be like, okay, it's time to get up. Like, no, it's not. You need to go back to sleep. So there's definitely a lot of stuff you can do for a family that's helpful to have. When my twins were newborns, we used a lot of tech. Like you walk into the room and it would bring the lights up just a little bit, enough so you could see it and change diapers, and
nice, so that you don't wake them up and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you could get in there and check on one of them and not wake the other one up, or mostly for us, so we could you don't want to walk in and get blinded because you got to go change a diaper. You want to have it real dim, and
Did you do any colored lights or anything, like red lights or something like that?
No, it was mostly just the just a white light, and just come up dim. One of the ones that you can control the white balance, so it's like it comes up really warm, dim,
yellow,
that sort of stuff, which is it's nice. My wife really isn't a fan of the RGB lights, so we keep those to a minimum. we're olds, we're not. RGB stuff's not cool for us, but
look at my house on the street and it looks like a disco. So
I know we actually have a neighbor over here that I haven't had a chance to talk to, but he's got either got LED strips or he went out and bought some commercial versions that are up there, but he's got different colored LED lights. And of course, every so often I look over there and half of them are off. I'm like, oh, he's having problems with his power supply.
Well, there's a guy at the end of my street, and every Halloween you'll see like this person goes insane for Halloween, right? And to the point where I'm pretty sure everything is plugged into one, maybe two outlets.
Oh God.
And again, and there's blowers, there's lights, there's all of it, right? Yeah. And you'll just see it start to like essentially just be like, just start like fluttering almost. You're like, okay, yeah, you think you're drawing a little too much power there.
Yeah, probably. It's like you go over there and the cord's melting.
Yeah. Oh,
it's on fire, smoking.
It's insane. But
what version of LED strip lights did you use in your kid's bed?
The Wise. It was there was actually the Wise LED strips, because that was what the video was on, was the Wise LED strips. So nice. I get contacted by a lot of companies for cameras and LED strips. Yeah. Everybody. You do one video and all of a sudden it's like, hey, review our camera. And like, I just did one on, I just did a Reolink one on their new Duo series, which is pretty cool. But I don't want to do reviews all the time. I like doing the more like how-to guides, but the reviews pay the bills, to say so.
Sure.
But yeah, the Wise strips were pretty good. Obviously they're not extendable. They're limited on the power supply. That's the one thing I've discovered when I got into LED stuff. It's like, it's the power supply that's your limiter, right? You can only go so many strips with a tiny power supply. So I've got quite a few of like the big power supplies. Like, this thing behind me has got, a ton of lights in it, a ton of LEDs, high density. So it's like, a bunch of stuff there. My 3D printer's got, a WS2812 lights on it. So it can show the status of the 3D print with a status bar at the top with the lights. So
that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's like it's fun to be able to kind of see that. You're like, it's almost done. You can see it's got a couple pixels left to go.
That's pretty cool.
So if someone's coming up to you right now and they're going to say, Ryan, how do I get like this smart home stuff happening? What's your number one tip to anyone new coming into the smart home space? What advice would you want to pass on to them?
I'll usually ask them kind of, what's your biggest problem? What's the problem you want to solve? Because a lot of people want to get into it because of the shininess. Like, oh, this is really cool. Like, no. You need to find a problem and solve it, because that will give you the biggest win. And then you'll go, I want to continue down the path. Because when you struggle with an issue, you're like, okay, but I'm still on the path to solving this problem. Whether it's my kids leave the light on. Like, that was one of the ones I did. This bathroom back here behind me, it's got a bunch of, it's got like a sconce or something in there. And my kid would leave the light on and shut the door. And I'd come back and be 100 degrees in there. And it's like 165 watts of power consumed. And so it's like, okay, that's his problem to solve. So I solved that problem. My cousin, who actually lives right across the street from me, she came the other day. She's like, I've got somebody working on my house and he keeps leaving my front door unlocked. Like, what do I do? Well, okay, you can get a smart lock and slap it on. Don't go full bore right at the beginning. Like, you're not going to buy into anything. I see these guys on like the Home Assistant subreddit. They're like, I just bought my house, and they have like a box of switches. Yeah, like, they're going to replace every switch. Like, that's too much. You're gonna get halfway through that project and quit because you're like, something's wrong. Or It's like, find one thing, fix the problem, move on to the next thing, and then eventually you're going to go, I really wish that when I leave my house, it locks the door and it turns off my air conditioner. And then that's when you'll discover Home Assistant and go, oh, I can tie this to this, because Home Assistant can seem really daunting when you first start up. Like, you start up to a blank screen. What the hell do I do now? I've got, it's all of a sudden discovered my TVs. So why would I want my TVs in Home Assistant? And then you kind of run down that path. So it's definitely, I tell people, start with one or two things and then get hooked, right? Then your wallet's empty at that stage. Like,
don't look back and see how much all those little steps cost you. Don't do that. No,
exactly.
It's the gateway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get a couple things under your belt. Get a Google, get an Alexa. Be like, okay, I'm gonna, oh my god, I can control this light. Like that's what I help somebody with. Like I can turn my light off, my lamp off with the thing. Like, and then you're like, I want every light in the house to be controlled, and then you're done for, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's but it's almost it's a nice like it's nice seeing that like come to fruition, right? Like as they start small and then grow and grow, and then it gets to the point where they're looking for problems to solve.
Yes,
and then it's like, okay, that you've kind of hit that part where you're like, okay, I'm good. Like this is a smart house now. Like because it's again, it's like what's to say? Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, whatever. Like smart life is in the eye of the beholder here in this case, right? That's
I mean, it could be anything from a simple like I can control this and this with Google to like the people that put in Control 4 systems in their house. You're like, yeah, that is a smart house, but that's an
expensive one.
They're really expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what people always come. I mean, that's the thing. People come and they go, I want everything automated. What do I need to do? And I'm like, go buy Control 4. And they're like, why? Like, because if you want it to work, you're going to have to spend a ton of money. If you want to play with it and fix things, of course, it works 90% of the time, 95% of the time.
Yeah.
But it's, there's still 5% of the time that you're going to have to be. So if you're not tech savvy, don't get into it because you're going to be, this went offline. I got to update this firmware. You're going to get bugged by it. So make it simple to start with, or if you want it, go with the crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's going to take care and feeding, right? Is essentially what it is.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's like everything, right? It's like having a Windows computer. You can't just run a Windows computer. You have to update the software. You have to, everything in technology takes something.
Not if you ask my wife. It's not going to reboot. We're not going to reboot it ever. We're not going to update it ever. And as somebody that's in IT security as well, like our information security, it's like, oh my god, please. So like I'll literally go in once a month and just update her machine and reboot it. And like, all right.
That's one of the things I've learned is like you just pick a day and do it. That's one of the things that we do is like, put a pop up on everybody's computer saying it's Tuesday, so tonight your computer's going to reboot. Because I had engineers that would be like, no, you can't reboot my computer because I might be running code. I'm like, don't run code on Tuesday nights. Done. Right? Problem solved. Because I would have engineers that would have computers they wouldn't reboot for a year. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Because what's going to happen is you're going to do something, it's going to explode, and you're going to come to me for help. And I'm like, well, that was your fault for not updating it,
Yeah. That's funny.
I'm running a most up-to-date computer. Don't worry about me. I'll just ignore this conversation.
That's the ones you have to worry about. When they say, don't worry about me, you're like, you're the one I need to worry about, aren't you?
Yeah, that's it. What is your hardware preference for Home Assistant at the moment? Are you thinking of moving over to a Home Assistant Yellow, or have you got like a nice beefy server already to run it on?
Yeah, so I like having redundancy. I have an Intel NUC running my home server. So Plex, I've got a media box that runs all of my backups, and something obscene like 16 terabytes of storage across a bunch of like just plugged in hard drives, right? Nothing like I don't have a NAS or anything like that. It's just like individual hard drives. But so I can actually run a virtual. So that's running Proxmox for a hypervisor. So I'm able to run multiple VMs on there. I do have a Home Assistant running on there, but I like to have redundancy in case the server goes down. So it's running on. I have a 8 gig Pi 4B with the solid state drive, and that's my Home Assistant instance. And so it's working pretty well. I mean, I have to restart it every so often. I just moved my Zigbee to MQTT to it, and that's caused a little extra strain, and it's having to be restarted more often. So I might move it back out. It was actually running on a Pi in here. I have something like 8 Raspberry Pis in my house. So
nice.
This whole shortage of Raspberry Pis has been hard on me. I got a lot of projects that use Raspberry Pis, and I'm like desperately trying to pull them out of other projects so I can keep them. I'm not paying $150 for Raspberry Pi, so
that's right.
Wow.
Well, I mean, if there's stuff you can move off to ESP, then that might be start distributing your workload there, right? So
yeah, well, that's what I went from I was using. I can't remember what project it was that it was using Bluetooth tracking using Raspberry Pi Ws, and so I deployed 5 Ws throughout the house, and that was great. But that became unreliable because of Bluetooth masking and stuff like that. And then I started getting involved with the ESP Presence project and playing around with that. And so I actually talk with I put a video out about it, and then the dev contacted me, and he and I worked together on a couple of things, and that's been really cool and really nice to be able to have that project, have those ESPs, as long as my network, then your network becomes the problem. So I've been gutting my network recently. I'm one of the fortunate few that have 2 gig Google Fiber in my house. So I've got 2.
Oh, that's right, because they started in Kansas.
Yeah, we started in Kansas City, Kansas. It was Kansas City, Kansas, and then they actually did all of the Kansas City. They did the entire Kansas City metro area. So I've had 1 gig for a while, but now I have 2 gig fiber. And I tell people, don't get it, because it's not, unless you're ready to gut your network and put in 2 gig switches. There's no point to do it. So, but of course I've done that though.
I mean, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's expensive though, man. I just went to
cool. That's really deep.
ESP, not OpenSense firewall. I just put one of those in because the gear that Google gives you, you think that Google will give you good gear for the 2 gigs? It's crap. It's terrible. It can't handle more than a handful of devices, which is like, this is people are going to be using this for high tier stuff. Why would you be giving them junk hardware? So, yeah. I mean, but who the hell's going to be getting? Yeah. Why would you have 2 gig bandwidth if you're not going to be able to utilize it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's got 1 2 gig port on the back of the device. It makes no sense. So, but it is nice to be able to have, like, I am no longer, like, my son's playing Xbox and he downloads an update. It's like, yep, that's not my fault. It's going at 100 megabits per second. Like, it would go faster, but Microsoft's slowing me down.
Wow, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is. It's nice. It's nice to basically just be like, yeah, I have the internet. I don't have to worry about bandwidth. There's no such thing as bandwidth. I have access to the internet. It's fine. It's good. So
lucky for some.
Yeah. And that's what it's one of the few good things about living in Kansas City is that we get 2 gig Google Fiber. So, and it crashed the fiber price in Kansas City. Like, AT&T fiber is $80 a month for 1 gig. Like, everybody has to compete with Google Fiber. That's the one nice thing about it. It took on the business side, right? It limited. You can't charge $5,000 for gig fiber anymore because you can go get Google for $250. Like, why would you do that? So it's forced the price of internet down in Kansas City, which has been really nice.
Well, Ryan, I think we're going to call it there. As I said, we've had to stop and start this recording a couple of times today, so I have no idea how long we've been talking for, probably too long. But we're going to leave links to your YouTube channel, any other socials that people can follow you on as well.
That's pretty much it. That's where I have other things, but mostly it points back to there. I've considered doing some short form videos, but it's hard to do like how-to videos in 1 minute or 2 minute. And
you need the extra detail and clarity that you just can't get in that time.
Right? So I thought about doing some quick tip stuff, but it's hard to do detailed explanations. And I also hate vertical video. So I'm a curmudgeon. I hate vertical video. I get it. No sense. If you're on the phone, but like, I just absolutely detest it. And I do, like, I've got drones now. All my drones come with they'll flip vertically. I'm like, ugh.
All right. Well, we'll leave links in the show notes. Ryan, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Anytime you need a filler, just let me know.
Will do, mate. Appreciate it.
I love talking this stuff. So thank you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant Podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.